Tracking the tropics as Melissa likely to become a major catastrophic hurricane in the Caribbean. Exactly how strong it could get and where it's going in today's video. Welcome in everyone. Happy Thursday, October 23rd. And obviously the tropics are the big storyline right now. Melissa continuing to churn away down into the Caribbean, slowly strengthening, but we could see rapid intensification by later this weekend and into early next week. And it's at that point, it's going to hook north and make landfall in at least one country, maybe multiple, and still cannot completely rule out United States impacts on down the road. We're going to be talking about all of it, all the possibilities, all the model data, and everything throughout the video. But I do ask here at the beginning, if you haven't already, go ahead, like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for the latest notifications. That keeps you in the loop, keeps you up to date. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. All it does is help keep you informed on the latest track of Melissa and the latest information on all weather events coming up on down the road. Alrighty, folks, let's go ahead and dive on into things and start going over the data. You can see next to me is the latest run of our European computer model and showing what it's been showing. We've been kind of locked in. We're starting to finally lock in on a forecast here. Now, obviously, little shifts back and forth are going to mean big differences for certain people, but this general idea of the storm slowly moving west-northwest over the next 3 or 4 days, slowly strengthening and then rapidly intensifying potentially over the western Caribbean and hooking it north towards Jamaica, potentially the Cayman Islands, Cuba, the Bahamas, and still an outside shot that the United States or Canada, I should also throw in that, could see impacts from this down the road. So the model, I think, doing a pretty good job of showing that general idea. Obviously, we'll get more in depth on it here in a moment. But first, let's just take a look at Melissa. Let's just take a broad look at the storm. What does it look like right now? Is it strengthening? Is it weakening? Well, I think it's starting to strengthen a bit more this morning compared to yesterday. And you might be thinking, well, Gerald, that's a little surprising. Yesterday, we had this big blob of convection and you said it wasn't doing much. Now we've got kind of dispersed and scattered convection and you think it's getting stronger. Well, I do. And here's why. If you look right here, this is actually kind of where the low level center of the storm is. And it's getting a big blow up of convection over it right now. So I think the system is finally trying to stack that low-level center and that mid-level center on top of each other, and that'll really help this intensify at a quicker pace should it be able to do that. Now, it's battling some wind shear right now, but it looks like it's trying to overcome that at least a little bit, and I do expect at least some strengthening over the next 24 to 48 hours. Cannot rule out even quicker than the minor strengthening if it can align these centers of circulation. That's really the big key right now to the forecast with Melissa. All right, in terms of where it's going, that's obviously the big question on everyone's mind. Right now, the storm is just a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm, not overly strong. Pressure is right around 1,000 millibars, probably a little bit below that. You can see, though, the track coming up is pretty straightforward. It's going to continue to meander west-northwest over the coming days and slowly strengthen. That's now through Friday and probably even into early Saturday. It's by later Saturday we're likely to get hurricane intensity, and then that's whenever it's going to continue to jog west, potentially, rapidly intensify, and then the question becomes, when does it hook north? Does it hook north into Jamaica? Does it do it into the Cayman Islands? Does it do it somewhere in between? That's really the tricky part of the forecast at this point, I would say. And then obviously whatever happens after Cuba would be another tricky forecast. We do have hurricane watches up for extreme southwestern Haiti right now. We also have hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings for the entire island of Jamaica as this storm will be making at the very least a very close pass for a prolonged period, potentially landfall as a major hurricane. With that said, let's go ahead and dive under the hood a little bit more of Melissa, talk about what it looks like right now, what kind of environmental features are influencing it, and then dive into that model data. We already talked about the infrared vision on the storm right now. Let's talk about a couple other things we can look at to see if we have any microwave imagery. We'll see if we do this morning. Actually, it looks like we do, so that is perfect. Let's go ahead and zoom into this. This kind of is a look under the hood of the storm, if you will, to kind of find where some of the deepest convection is and if it's trying to do anything that is noteworthy. And from what I can see, it looks like we are starting to get, like I said, maybe a little bit more of some deeper convection near where the center of the storm is. Like I said, it's starting to wrap around what may be an initial core developing this morning, and with the current position of the storm somewhere right into here, that's on the side that it hasn't had any convection yet. So maybe this means it's starting to wrap up a bit. I would definitely could see that being a case here. If we look at a different channel here, you could see kind of the same thing, just further displaced off south of Jamaica. But either way, that shows the storm is trying to wrap itself up. It's trying to align those different centers. And as I mentioned before, that's very important for the forecast here on down the road. We'll see if we have any AMSU data, which we do not, or it looks like we have some ATMS data, which we can take a look at. And like I said, showing the same thing. You can see some of the deeper convection wrapping around now on the northwestern side. Also, the southwestern side, we have a big area of deeper convection. So we'll see if this can begin to align the center a little bit more. My guess is it will throughout the day today. But as we've been talking about, one of the big things is wind shear with this storm, and it is still dealing with wind shear. Now, it's fighting against it as best as it can. I'll give it that much. And the center is kind of straddling right into here in a pocket that, while unfavorable, it's not super far from more favorable upper level winds. So this isn't going to be enough to completely kill the system or rip it apart, unfortunately, as we would want. The storm going to hold on. This is really just going to limit the chance for rapid intensification more than anything. We look at scatterometer data, but honestly, it's not all that important. We know the storm is closed, has a closed center, and we've got hurricane hunters flying in there, so that's not going to be as important right now. What I will show you, here's the cone. If we look at some model data, you could see the National Hurricane Center as the storm going a bit further south than what a lot of the data says. This is because of the beta effect. It's a very big part of forecasting tropical systems and meteorology. I could go into all the nitty gritty, but in the name of time, let me just tell you this. Generally, storms go further west and don't want to turn north as quickly as models suggest. We've already seen that with the GFS being completely wrong, at least so far. It looks like we'll be completely wrong on the storm moving up into Hispaniola. That did not happen the way the model projected because of the beta effect. So the National Hurricane Center taking that into an account here, and you can see a bit skewed from what some of the models show, and I think that's a good idea on their part. I definitely agree with that general forecast that they're going with. We'll see if we have any other things here that are important. Yeah, there is this, obviously, that I meant to show. This is one of the key parts for this system, likely rapidly intensifying later on down the road. That is the sea surface temperatures, folks. I mean, we've just got insanely warm waters out here. The warmest waters in the Atlantic are right where this storm is. Sea surface temperatures up near 31 degrees Celsius. You only need about 26.5 Celsius to support a hurricane. So obviously that's well above that. On top of that, the ocean heat content is through the roof, and it's not showing up right now. I'll pull it up in another map, I guess, but it's very high. We've got plenty of ocean heat content out here. Maybe if I zoom out, it'll show up. Let's give it one shot here. It doesn't look like it. It's all right. We'll deal with it. But like I said, if you've been watching the past couple of days, the warm water out here, not only at the surface of the ocean, it goes very deep. That's what I mean whenever I say ocean heat content. That just provides a lot of fuel for this system to work with. And because of that, if you look at the MPI, or the max potential intensity with this storm, you can see that this could support a system with very low millibars. I mean, this could easily get sub 900 millibars if the wind shear and dry air do not wreak havoc on the storm and or land interaction. That's what this means in terms of all of the warm ocean water that we have out here. All right, that's a quick look under the hood at the storm right now and the general environment around it currently. Now let's look at model data and time out what's going to happen in the future with what will soon be Hurricane Melissa. All right, here's an ocean heat content map that wasn't showing up on the last one, but you can see, like I said, the Caribbean has some of the deepest warm waters in the Atlantic. In fact, the deepest warm waters in the Atlantic, which obviously spells trouble should a storm pass right over it. And that's why I'm pretty concerned about this one, given it's going to work right over that. Also, some other environmental features are going to be around that could potentially support rapid intensification into a major hurricane with category 4 and 5 definitely on the table. Let's walk you through some model data. We'll start with the European, and then we'll show you the Canadian, and then I will reluctantly show you the GFS, although I think it's being a bit of an idiot right now, and you'll see why. And then I'll show you some of the hurricane data and those models. Here's the European. I think easily doing the best right now with this storm, which is typical, it seems, especially as of late. Slowly meanders this off to the north and west over the next day or two. And remember, the timestamp is above my head. That's an Eastern Standard Time here, so New York City time. So, maybe add a couple hours if you're into the Caribbean, depending on what part of the Caribbean you're in. But that's what the time is in above my head, just for your convenience. Now, here we go. It's Saturday morning. The storm, I think, is going to start to really intensify. You can see it's just south of Jamaica there. And on the European, it really starts to gain momentum. It starts to form deeper pressures and become a hurricane right around that part of the early weekend. And it just is so close to Jamaica. This model run, and you'll see with most of the ensembles, keep it just south of the island, however, dangerously close. And then eventually it hooks north. But on the latest European model run, it stalls out and starts that turn north just south of the island, which means it just sits over Jamaica for multiple days, for Monday, Tuesday, and that's after already being just off the island, lashing without a rain bands for multiple days as well, and then gets up near Cuba. That's as far out as the morning model run goes. I'll show you the overnight model run as well, just so you can kind of see the similarities and the differences. Here's the overnight run. The big difference is on the overnight run, it stayed further south from Jamaica, got further west, and then turned north. Because of that, it found even more favorable conditions for strengthening, and it becomes just a very strong Category 5 storm, clips western Jamaica, and then slams right into Cuba and the Turks and Caicos, and then pulls north. That's the European model. Here's the Canadian model. What does it show? Well, all the models that I'm trusting at least are pretty similar over the next 48 hours. Like I said, very slow, but some strengthening of the system. Continues north and westward, gets south of Jamaica, then tries to push more westbound. The Canadian gets really far west with this, and like the European overnight run, forms into a major hurricane, pulls it north into Cuba, then into the northern Bahamas, even clips the Keys and Miami with some outer rain bands of this thing, and then starts to pull north from there towards Bermuda. And things get a little weird potentially with the United States after that, which you'll see here coming up a little bit later on in the forecast. Like I said, I will reluctantly show the GFS. Folks, the GFS has been really bad with this storm, and I tried to give it the benefit of the doubt early on. I said, you know what, maybe the GFS is right. It's been really consistent. Well, it's consistently wrong. So I'll show it to you to say I did, but I think this is a really unlikely scenario at this point. The GFS still shows this storm moving into Haiti and the Dominican Republic. I don't buy it. I don't see it happening, and then pulls it up and out from there. Now, will Haiti especially still see impacts from this storm from the outer rain bands? Absolutely. Is it going to be a direct landfall like the GFS shows? We never say never in meteorology, but I would be shocked if that ends up being the case with this system. Now let's look at some of the hurricane models and show you what they show. And unfortunately, folks, it's a pretty scary picture. Here's the H-Wharf model, and I'll show this one. I'm not buying this one as much as the next model, which I'll show you, which is the HAFS-A model. But this one's a little bit closer to the GFS, not as crazy as the GFS, but closer. It agrees with everything else. Slow strengthening over the next 24 to 48 hours. I think that's pretty well something that we can expect with Melissa here, strengthening towards hurricane status over the next day or so. Then gets up near Jamaica. This model actually tries to make a landfall early on as a strong major hurricane, just lashes the island with a ferocious hurricane here. As early as late Saturday into Sunday, and then it works into the island, obviously weakens some due to land interaction, then gets back on the other side of the island, strengthens again into a major hurricane, and slams into southern Cuba. Now, I think this model is a good explanation or maybe picture of what an earlier turn would look like. This is what a storm that goes a little bit further north quicker would do compared to what some of the other data says. And this is as far out as the model goes, I should add, as it's slamming extreme southeastern Cuba. Here's the HAFS-A model. I think this one does a better job at showing maybe something a little bit more of a further west track, which I buy slightly more than the further east track that the last model showed you. Same thing though, slow strengthening over the next day or two, even gets pretty close up towards Haiti, but then gets into that more westerly wind flow, strengthens into a major hurricane, stays south of Jamaica, the core of it at least. You can see though, this is overnight Sunday, those outer rain bands still hitting the island, especially the southern part of it, and then continuing westbound. Look at the pressure, folks. By early Monday, 919 millibars. That's a Category 5 storm, I can almost guarantee you, and continues to maintain that intensity south of the island. And this is as far out as it goes as it continues to kind of stall out a little bit and keeps that pressure below 920 millibars. And eventually, this would likely start to curve north and either hit Jamaica directly or just skim the western coast and then work up into Cuba is what we would get with a solution like that. So you can see the hurricane models are all in on rapid intensification with this once we hit the weekend. Why is that? Well, if we look at some of the global models, you can see why with the environmental conditions that are expected. We'll start with humidity values. Obviously, you don't want dry air if you're a hurricane, and unfortunately, I don't see a whole lot of dry air that's going to be able to impede this storm. Now, we've got a little bit up into the northwestern Caribbean right now, but you notice the storm really defends it off pretty well in all the model guidance. By the time we get to this weekend and early next week, while there is some dry air nearby, it doesn't really look to be enough to kill off the storm. And again, let me go back to the overnight model run so we can go further out in time. You can see dry air in the Gulf, but it's just not quite able to get into this storm in a meaningful way, at least while it's in the Caribbean. That's likely due to the marsupial pouch that the storm has. Basically, that just means it's already got a well-defined kind of core of higher in moisture content. When a hurricane has that, oftentimes it does a better job at fighting off some of the just drier air that maybe a weaker storm would not be able to do. Now, granted, right now it's weaker, but it's likely going to become much stronger by the time that dry air gets close enough. Here's the bigger thing, folks, and that's the upper level wind pattern. And I'll even add, obviously, we've talked about the ocean heat content out here. That's not a problem. We've got enough latent heat release potential out of the ocean here to easily support a Category 5 storm. But the upper level pattern could also support something like that as we get into the weekend and early next week. Here's what the upper level pattern looks like. And again, I need to set this back to one model run. Unfortunately, I forgot to do that here at the start of the video. My apologies. But notice what happens. The upper level pattern really starts to spread things out right into here when the storm gets quite strong. I'll start to kind of draw over these streamlines that we have, and basically these just show us where the winds are blowing, and it's doing something kind of like this. Notice how the arrows are all pointing in generally different directions. That's really separating the air over the storm, helping for it to really ventilate the system, if you will, and allow it to strengthen and take advantage of those very warm sea surface temperatures. If we had very strong shear over it like we do now, all the way through the weekend and into early next week, we would be talking about a lower end scenario here. But because the upper level pattern looks to become more favorable, especially the further west this gets, if this gets out here a good bit west of Jamaica, it only gets more favorable from there. Now, if it obviously runs into the island sooner, it's going to have land problems and the upper level pattern won't be as special to the storm, if you will. But it's right out here in this circled area of the Caribbean that it just has the sky is the limit in terms of intensity of this system, and something we need to watch, especially with the track. If it trends further west into that direction, the intensity is going to trend up even more. All right, let's talk about the steering currents now. What's steering the storm and how may that affect where it ends up? I'll start with just the current steering currents. What's moving it right now? Well, we've got a bit of a high pressure up here, kind of the Bermuda high, if you will. That's wanting to pull it north, which I think is what the GFS is just seeing too much of. But then right over the storm, we have a bit of a upper level low pressure, actually, that is trying to steer it more towards Jamaica. And then out towards the country of Mexico here, we've got some southerly winds from another low pressure, it looks like, that is kind of counteracting all of that. So because of that, we've got competing steering currents. That's making it move slowly, but it's really these two right here that are the main factors trying to influence the storm. But it has already continued to go further west than a lot of model data has suggested. And I think the beta effect is doing a lot here to keep it a lot more influenced by this southern piece of flow. And because of that, that's why I'm expecting a much more further south track than some of the models like the GFS that immediately just try to fly this thing north. I think a southerly track just south of Jamaica over the next couple of days, to me, seems like the most likely scenario. Eventually, though, as all things do, we are going to see changes here in the upper level pattern that is eventually going to scoop the storm up. You can see right now there's really just not a lot of major steering flow over the Caribbean. So I just showed you that map. Those are not big pieces in the grand scheme of what often would be steering a hurricane. And like I said, that's leading to very slow motion. But we are going to see that change. Here we go by early next week. We can see, excuse me, this is by Tuesday afternoon, a big trough trying to dip down into the lower 48. Hurricanes are kind of get drawn to troughs, especially to the right-hand side of them, where these troughs like to scoop up energy. And that's going to help to pick up Melissa north eventually. The big question at this point, I think, is just when. Does it do it just south of Jamaica and throw it into Jamaica and then southeastern Cuba and then to the Turks and Caicos? Does it do it towards the Cayman Islands and up into Cuba, then into the northern Bahamas? All of that is a big question. Another big question on down the road is what happens once it passes all the Caribbean islands. I mean, this big trough looks to sit over the U.S. right when the storm passes by. This would be right around Halloween. Oftentimes, what can happen is these storms kind of merge, and this upper level low could pick up the hurricane and sling it back into the U.S. or into Canada, or it could just and do something like this, All of those are still options that unfortunately we just don't have a very good answer to right now. But as we switch on over and look at the ensembles, you'll see there are a couple different camps showing up with some very interesting tracks mixed in. We'll start with the Caribbean side of things, then we'll look at potential US and maybe Canadian impacts, which, again, an outside shot, but not a 0% chance up to this point. I know you're looking at this and you're thinking, what in the world? I mean, you talk about spaghetti mess, and you always see the memes when somebody just throws spaghetti on the map and they're like, this is what your local meteorologist is showing you. Well, yeah, here I am. I'm that local meteorologist right now. But it goes to show we've got a lot of possibilities still. We've got anything from the fact that this storm goes up and then turns north into Jamaica pretty quickly and then out towards the Turks and Caicos to all the way west, maybe even clipping Central America, then pulling north into the northern Bahamas. All of those options are on the table. Personally, I lean with something in between. These are the European ensembles, I should add. I think this gets up, stays south of Jamaica, continues westward, and then kind of hooks it north near the Cayman Islands, probably between the Cayman Islands and Jamaica, but closer to the Cayman Islands would be my current guess, given how the storm has trended and what we're seeing in the model data. That's what kind of my gut says right now. Show you some other data. This is the GFS ensembles. And I mean, even the GFS ensembles back up the European probably more than its operational run. It does still have this weird cluster over here. It just wants to pull this north into Haiti and to the Dominican Republic. Like I said, I just don't buy it right now. The National Hurricane Center doesn't buy it. GFS is doing GFS things. I don't know why we even use it anymore. Sometimes I think I'd be a better forecaster if I forgot that it even existed. But alas, I'll be a good forecaster and use all the tools in my forecasting toolbox, but not using this tool today. You can see though, still, honestly, I think this cluster right here might be about right, where this kind of gets out near Jamaica, stays south, goes a little bit further west, turns north near the Cayman Islands, and then into generally central Cuba, and right up through the Bahamas after that. Here's the AI model, and or the AI models, I should say, with all of its members, showing another scenario, and I think pretty good mix of the GFS and the European here. Like I said, though, I lean more towards this cluster. The AI is further east than the European ensembles, and that could maybe be onto something here. This would be problematic, though, because notice every single member that gets this south of Jamaica and especially west of Jamaica blows this up into a major hurricane. Every single one of them. And that's been another big storyline to tell you. I do think something to note is if it turns north sooner, this might be more of a category 3-4 storm. If it turns north later, this could be more of a category 4-5 storm. I think that is something we're seeing in the data here. So, obviously we don't want it to turn sooner and hit Jamaica dead on, but that would probably mean a slightly weaker storm. Now, either way, still a catastrophic storm, one that you would need to take and pay very close attention to. But that's kind of what I'm seeing in some of the data. And you can see, though, we're becoming into better agreement here. This is going to start to turn west, then north eventually. As I keep saying, the question is, where is that northward turn? I kind of already told you where I think it'll be. All right, what about the United States and Canada? Well, we're not out of the woods yet either. Let's take a look at some ensembles for those two countries and show you some of the potential possibilities. Here are the AI ensembles, and you can start to see if we bring this out. This is past 10 days, but you can notice we start to see two camps. We've got a camp here on the left and a camp here on the right. The one on the right just kind of brings us out to sea, maybe even would be a problem for Bermuda. Obviously, Bermuda is such a small island that, we'll see. But then this camp on the left, which a minority, but not, a whole lot. It's only 5%. I'd say it's a good 10, 20%, brings this north and then wants to hook it really north into potentially maritime Canada. Cannot rule out the United States. And this is because what we've been talking about. We've got that big trough coming down, that big trough of low pressure. Does that trough guide it out to sea, or does it suck it up Hurricane Sandy style? And again, I'll pause here and say, I'm not saying we're going to get Sandy 2.0. I'm just saying that that's how these troughs work. They're going to do one of the two. The more likely scenario right now is out to sea. You can see that in the ensembles. But a couple members do some funky things and start to pull this a little bit closer to North America, at least the mainland here. The European ensembles also show that general thinking. You've got most members, probably 60, 70%, maybe 70, 80 even, that pull this out to sea safely after the Bahamas. But you do see some members that start to pull this up into the Northeast. Now, I say that could be the Northeast United States, that could be maritime Canada, all options on the table there. And a couple operational runs have shown this as well. The Canadian model yesterday showed some insanity like that. Is that going to be what happens? Right now, it's not my forecast, but obviously we'll keep watching and we'll see what the GFS ensemble say as well. It looks like they, too, also show kind of some of that interesting turn north with some of the members. But obviously, like I said, I'm not very fond of the GFS right now, so we'll push that to the side and leave it alone. All right, that's all the possibilities with the storm. Let's get down into the impacts now and show you, obviously it's one thing to talk about track and intensity, but what does that mean for you folks down there towards Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic? Impacts on the way. Let's talk about them. All right, this is where things start to get pretty serious, folks. I mean, we're going to see some pretty intense rainfall numbers here. This is just now through, it looks like, the 26th of October, that morning. So that would be, I believe, Sunday morning, if my math serves me correctly. You can see a lot of rain on the way. Now, the majority of it offshore, but localized sections here just now through Sunday morning, like I said, into the eastern tip of Jamaica, the southwestern shorelines of Haiti, and even the southern Dominican Republic shorelines. We could see up to a foot of rain. That would be 200 to 300 millimeters of rainfall in that time frame that we're potentially watching for. The other thing is, that's not the end of the storm. I mean, after that, the storm keeps moving. Let me show you the latest European model and some of its rainfall output. This is in millimeters, by the way. You can see the key there at the bottom. Might be hard to read, but look at all the rain it brings to Jamaica, folks. I mean, the storm, at least from the European, which we showed you earlier, it brings 400 to 600 millimeters of rainfall. That's that's a foot plus. It's a foot to 2 feet of rain over a country that, unfortunately, with the terrain, you could get a lot of landslides, you could get a lot of runoff, you could see easily flash flooding. This isn't even talking about storm surge, which could be a possibility out here. Luckily, a lot of at least parts of the island go up in elevation quickly, so that would help. However, you get this much freshwater rain, it's a big problem. And you can even see down here into southern Haiti as well. Do not sleep on this storm in southern Haiti. Like I said, I don't think it's going to make landfall there. However, the outer rain band is going to last you for multiple days and easily bring flash flooding concerns to the island, even the southern bits of the Dominican Republic to a lesser extent, but still heavy rainfall that could lead to flooding. And then after that, wherever it turns north is going to get it bad too, rainfall-wise, somewhere in Cuba. Now, this heavy batch could be further up the coast. It could be where it's at here. That part we still need to figure out. Parts of the Bahamas going to get heavy rainfall. The good news for the Cayman Islands, Cuba, and the Bahamas is the storm's going to start to speed up. Now, all of this blob that you see, all these heavy colors, that's because the storm's basically moving at a crawl, or it's hardly moving at all. Once it hooks north, it's going to do it pretty quickly. So that'll be the good news there. But that doesn't mean that it'll save you from potential wind impacts. I'll show you the European and the wind gust forecast. Now, these are max wind gusts. This is as bad as it would get. And like I said, little shifts back and forth in this data. That means that the heaviest of this wind could shift one way or the other. But I think numbers-wise, it's onto something. This is in kilometers per hour as well, I will add. Southern shoreline of Jamaica, pretty breezy over the next couple of days. We're talking up near 70, 80 kilometer per hour winds, into the weekend, especially Saturday, Sunday, look to be very breezy days. And then the storm starts to pull north, and this is when things really get bad, folks. This is Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. Like I said, you could see this blob of very heavy wind or very strong wind that could shift further west. It could be where it's at. I doubt it shifts further east, but if anything, I'd say it's where it's at here, maybe further west, given the trends we've seen so far in the data. I mean, we're talking 200 plus kilometer per hour max wind gusts, folks. Those are devastating winds. Those are catastrophic winds. Those are the kind of winds that, cause big time problems, and we do not want to see potentially into Jamaica, and then even potentially moving up into Cuba, seeing very strong winds, 100 to 200 kilometer per hour wind gusts at times, and then the Bahamas would be up next with those same wind speeds, and then hopefully we're all good by the end of next week. Obviously, that's a ways to go, and that's a lot of time to continue tracking this thing at all. But the wind will be another big factor with this storm. Exactly who gets the worst of it to be determined. But right now, Jamaica is in the hot spot. Cuba, now we're in Cuba right now. Like I said, I think somewhere right into this region, potentially going to have the highest impacts. And then the Cayman Islands, don't sleep on this as well. Should this shift further west than it currently is, obviously you too would be in the path of the strongest winds. All right, that's your update on the tropics. I know that was a lot. Let's do a very brief, and I do mean brief, quick summary of what we're talking about in the lower 48, and then I'll let you go because I'm sure this video has already gone long enough. Weather back home, well, we've got a storm system working into the Rockies right now. Classic Colorado low going to develop. Watch for severe weather if you're watching in Texas and Oklahoma over the next couple of days as this Colorado low deepens. We could see a little bit of severe weather out here. You can see it there developing. That's by tomorrow morning. or late tonight. By tomorrow afternoon, heavy rain, showers, storms over Texas, Oklahoma, shifting into Arkansas, Louisiana by Saturday and Sunday. And then by early next week, Monday, we could have some very cold, wet days, very much needed rainfall into the southeast, South Carolina, North Carolina, potentially Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia, the Florida Panhandle. This low pressure starts to be a classic southern slider. If this were wintertime, I'd be talking about big ice and snow into the Carolinas, but alas, it is October, so this instead means highs potentially north of 85, stuck in the 40s and 50s. Would not shock me at all with on and off rain all day, potentially for your Monday. And could even last into Tuesday, as a lot of the models trying to get a secondary coastal low to develop here by early next week or the middle of next week. We'll focus on that a lot more as we get closer and we know exactly what's happening with Melissa, but keep a very close eye on this. We could get a big time East Coast storm next week. A lot of the models showing that, even shows winter impacts up into the portions of the Northeast. Yeah, you heard it here first, right? Or maybe you didn't, but something we'll be watching. Rainfall now through the next 7 days. You can see heaviest totals, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, but the Carolinas, Georgia, portions of the mid-Atlantic, much needed rain on the way potentially now through early next week with that southern slider, and then we'll see what that potential big coastal storm would do. The other thing I will mention is this. All signs are pointing to a pretty good cool down towards Halloween into the east, especially the southeast, the mid-Atlantic. The Climate Prediction Center is showing it. This is now, or I shouldn't say now, this is basically next week, next Tuesday through Saturday, showing that cool down as a lot of troughing works into the east. Excuse me. And then even 8 to 14 days out, same thing. So I think a very active end of the month here into the east. And it's a shame we've got to track the tropics at the same time, or else I'd put a lot more energy into talking about this. But right now, Melissa is still the number one threat. However, we'll watch how those trends are for the potential of a big East Coast storm, which could influence Melissa as well, obviously, as we've mentioned. So one of the big storylines here to track. Alrighty, folks, that's all I've got for you on this Thursday. Appreciate you hanging in there with me. I was probably a little all over the place today. But either way, hopefully I got the information to you in a way that makes sense and is clear enough. All right, y'all have a great one. Stay safe, and I'll see you all next time.